Thank you. Okay, you're live. You seem muted. Can't hear you. No. No. Mrs. Maris, can you hear Mrs. Lofton? Can you hear me? Okay.
Judy's mute is still showing on the screen as it being muted.
Okay, thank you. She said you're still showing muted. You might have to... Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening school board meeting. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And we'll start with 1.02, which is the roll call, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Widener.
Thank you. Mr. Dorr?
Here.
Mrs. Evans-Brockett?
Here.
Dr. Hallis?
Here.
Dr. Kohler?
Here.
Mrs. Lofton?
Here.
Mrs. Mayers?
Here.
Mrs. Roberts?
Here.
Dr. Weston? Dr. Weston?
He's saying here, but he's muted for some reason.
Okay.
We'll get Mr. Ganesh to assist.
All right. Miss White?
Thank you.
Here.
Thank you.
Have a mask. Okay, please join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America
and to the republic
for which
which
it
stands
one
one
nation
nation
under God,
with
indivisible,
liberty and
With
justice for
liberty
all.
and justice for all.
Okay, we'll move on to section 1.04, the reading of the PVSD mission statement. The mission of the Perkman Valley School District is to cultivate an inclusive community of learners empowered to grow intellectually, socially, and emotionally. That brings us to 1.05, the approval of the agenda. Can I please have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved. Second, Gene.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions about the agenda? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, 1.06, approval of minutes. May I please have a motion to approve the minutes of September 14, 2020 and October 5th, 2020?
So moved.
Second, Matt.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions about the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. 1.07, our special topic presentation was given last week. That brings us to 1.08, comments on any topic. Comments are accepted from the audience on any topic. Mrs. Widener, did we receive any written comments prior to the meeting?
We did not.
Okay. If anyone wishes to make a verbal comment during the meeting, the guidelines for doing so are here. Please use the raise your hand function, which you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Everyone can have up to 3 minutes for making their comments. Please begin by stating your name and the municipality within which you live. And we'll open the floor now for comments from the audience. I'm not seeing any hands up. So we'll go ahead and proceed to section 2, reports. Student liaisons report. Ms. McGovern and Mr. Smith, do you have any updates to your report from last week?
I don't have any updates. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. I do not have anything to add for 2.02, so 2.03, superintendent's report. Dr. Russell, do you have any updates?
I do. I will be very brief, but I would like to update the board and the public on some recent news around spectators as the county has approved our plan to host spectators, some number of spectators at athletic contests right now. That would also encompass marching band competitions and cheerleader participation. So I'll just very briefly present to you what will be presented to the board in summary format later this meeting. So there is a formula that has been presented, as many of us learned last week, as an amendment to the governor's order about no spectators. And we've gone back and forth with this. We discussed the court cases and the rulings last week. At any rate, there has been an amendment that has created a formula. It's presented a formula to school districts to figure out, based on the capacity of a venue, the maximum number of spectators or attendees in that venue that are possible. And a plan was necessary to be submitted to the Office of Public Health, and their approval was granted today for these numbers that you see here in the chart. So again, there are considerations for capacity, as well as the number of participants that we would have, for example, in a football game that includes marching band and cheerleaders. So 600 spectators in the stadium right now all must wear masks and socially distance. And we will have hand sanitizer and operating restrooms so that they can access the opportunity to wash hands. The competition gym you see is 372, the natatorium 33, and grass fields 250 because they're outside. There are markings outside and there are signs posted as well on our grass fields that prompt reminders to individuals attending of what's expected and those health and safety guidelines. With what has been approved by the county, there are still no visiting team spectators permitted at this time. However, at a glance, this gives you a sense of the high-level aspects of the plan that need to be upheld and the number of spectators that we can host in these venues. And our board will be considering that also later this evening. So we have received the county's approval. Lastly, very briefly, I just want to mention that on Monday, a week from today, we will welcome our next phase of students back for on-site instruction, presuming they've chosen to participate in on-site instruction. We will welcome grades 3 through 5 students on a half-day model, grade 8 and grade 12 in a hybrid model. That starts Monday, and we're looking forward to seeing more students in and about our buildings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Russell. That brings us on to the next section in our agenda, which is 2.04, the solicitor's report. Mr. Supers, do you have any updates for us?
I do not have any updates. Thanks.
Okay. Moving on, 2.05, board and district committee reports. We did have finance committee meeting last week. Were there any other committees last week?
I don't think so.
Okay, so you'll see the addition of the finance committee notes here at the bottom of the motion. So those are updated from last week. That brings us, does anyone have anything to add on the board and district committee reports? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. We'll move on to section 3, comments on the consent agenda. Comments are accepted on any agenda items from the audience. Same guidelines that I mentioned before. Please use the raise your hand feature and you can have up to 3 minutes. Okay, I'm not seeing any raised hands. So we will proceed to section 3.02, approval of the consent agenda. Items that represent standard routine business of the board are included in the consent agenda. Is there any item that a board member would like to have removed from the consent agenda developed on October 5th, 2020, and placed back into the regular agenda for questions or discussion? The consent items include 4.03, 4.04, 4.05, 4.07, 5.04, 5.05, 5.06, 5.07, 5.08, 7.12, 7.13, 7.14, 8.06, 8.07, 8.08, 9.03, and 9.04. May I please have a motion to approve the consent agenda developed on October 5th, 2020.
So moved, Gene.
Second, Wade.
Okay, are there any questions or requests to have any items removed? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The consent agenda is approved, and that takes us to section 4, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Kohler.
Thank you, Mrs. Lofton. Item 4.01, comments from the audience are accepted on education. I don't believe I see any hands raised. So moving on, item 4.02, the education update was presented last week. Item 4.03, 4.04, 4.05 are all on consent. Item 4.06, the recommended action is a motion to approve the phased school reopening health and safety plan version 10 for the 2020-2021 school year as presented. So they are attached. Are there any comments or questions? Oh, I guess I need to say I so move. Sorry.
Second, Matthew Dorr.
I see Mrs. Evans-Brockett has her hand up.
Thank you. First of all, just thank you to Dr. Russell for answering the questions I had from last week. And I just wanted to bring up, we had discussed swimming during this part of the agenda last week. And I know there's been some emails back and forth between board members. So I didn't know if this was an appropriate time to have that discussion, if that needed to be included in the health and safety plan as far as the plan for swimming at the high school.
So actually, Mr. Suber, should that discussion go here, or I'm not sure if it's directly, would it, Mrs. Evans-Brockett, I guess part of my question is, does that, I recognize it's connected to the health and safety plan due to the lockers. I don't recall seeing anything, and perhaps you've read this much more carefully than I have, but was there anything specifically in the health and safety plan about swim lessons?
No, and so that's my question is, does it need to be included in the health and safety plan if we are in fact allowing that, or, you know, does some sort of language need to be included one way or the other?
Well, and I guess the question is, do we support continuing to allow it?
The other question is, if you're allowing it, are there any special health and safety precautions for just the swimming that aren't already included in the plan as generally? I was just saying the only other consideration would be if you are amenable to continuing swim lessons, are there any other safety measures?
I'm sorry, I can't hear Mr. Subers. He's on mute.
Sorry. Yep, there we go. I was just saying that in addition to just considering whether to continue to allow swim lessons, if there were any specific mitigation measures or safety precautions that would be applicable to swimming only and that aren't already mentioned in the health and safety plan, it would be appropriate to add them.
I'll just say, I know in some of the conversations I had with a few of the board members back and forth, I do not support swimming during PE at this time. I think it's a safety risk that doesn't need to be taken. And I think having students having to carry their wet clothes around throughout the day because we're not using lockers is not fair to students.
So
I agree with that.
And I'll chime in with that as well. I think that it's my understanding, just sort of with my parent hat on and talking with other parents, that this is not something that students look forward to in their school day. I completely agree that ensuring that all students know how to swim and are instructed in water safety, it's an important life skill. It's something that should be a part of our curriculum. But the other part of that is that this year, if we're only in school a fraction of the time that we normally would be, and some of our students are participating virtually, students aren't getting the water safety lessons that we're stating are so important to ensure that they're receiving. So I would support putting a pause on swim lessons until we're back in school on a full-time basis, and able to use lockers so that it is a more comfortable experience for students, and so that they are getting the full water safety component of the lessons.
I agree with that as well.
I concur too.
Does anyone disagree?
Mrs. Lofton, I don't disagree, but we don't have a motion or a vote on this, correct? Like, we're just talking about what we're adding to the safety plan at this point?
So, Mr. Stuber, should we just share with Dr. Russell that is our recommendation to do this, or should we ask for the safety plan to be amended to say that swimming lessons during the school day will not be a part of the regular school day until we return to full-time instruction?
I would ask that Dr. Kohler and Mr. Doer agree to a friendly amendment, that the motion be to approve the phase reopening health and safety plan, subject to the condition that swim lessons not be provided in physical education pending return to full-time in-person instruction.
I would agree with that.
Dr. Kohler?
I would agree with that, but can I just add, I don't know that the issue is attending full-time instruction, but I think it's more the use of lockers being permitted. Is that true?
Attendance, well, then the condition to, subject to the condition that swim lessons not be provided as part of the physical education program pending the return to full-time in-person instruction and the availability of student access to lockers.
Okay, so I amend my motion to what you just said, Mr. Stuber.
And hopefully
And
Mrs.
I
White
second.
got that. Okay.
I have another question though before we vote on the plan as a whole, if that's okay.
Of course.
Just the PSBA email that came out today had a number of articles about how schools are reporting coronavirus cases, and it sounds like schools are coming up with policies regarding that. And so I didn't know if that was also something that should be a part of our health and safety plan, or where that came into effect, and what our plan is in terms of reporting any positive cases.
Right now, we report all positive cases directly to the Office of Public Health. So I don't know that it needs to be a part of the plan. We can certainly add it if that brings just
I'm sorry. I was more talking about reporting to the community. That's what these articles were about, was making
I'm sorry.
the school district community aware.
Yeah. So we can certainly add that if you would like. We have taken the position that once we learn about a student, and we have another one from this past weekend, we have indicated to our community that we will be sharing the information. And because there are some other considerations with this case, we are planning to communicate that out tomorrow. So we have taken that stance as a district. If it would be appropriate in everyone's view to incorporate it into the plan, I'm happy to do that and add that as a revision, as a contingency for approval.
Do you also report if any staff have tested positive? Does that go out to the community, or just if a student has tested positive?
Right now, the administrative regulation, if you will, the policy we've adopted, or the protocol, is if kids are in the building, yes, we will plan to communicate that. Absolutely. We have had 2 staff test positive, and in neither case were they working with students or were students present.
I would support having that in our health and safety plan as well. I just think that that's offering more transparency to our community so that we know how we're reporting those cases.
Can I just add on to that point really quickly? In addition to the communication via email is really how it's been translated. Is it maybe best practice to put it in some sort of a like a timeline chart or something like that on the district's website, or are we really trying to not, I don't want to say not have record of it, but I just mean from like a histrionic standpoint, for us to be able to go back and reference kind of a timeline in tracking positives. Is that worthwhile, or is that something that would maybe be just an exercise in futility?
They are. You're muted again, Mr. Subers.
I just commented that I would expect that the county public office of health would maintain that information, and that information would be available to the public through the county. And I believe Dr. Russell concurred that
Yes.
that was the case.
And our nurses keep very careful records within each school of individuals who even present not feeling well, whether or not they go and get tested, the results of those tests. It's very carefully documented. And they meet regularly under the leadership of Mrs. Lewis with representatives from the Department of Health. So that information is being recorded. It's not being communicated out necessarily to the public, but we do have that as a record.
So I guess my kind of ongoing frustration is that the metrics that we use is county metrics, which I understand because we're part of Montgomery County and all that. But I just have this sort of core feeling that it's an inaccurate representation of our area, of our school district and our surrounding school districts. So I think because Montgomery County is so large, I would have, to Judy's point before about the parent hat, from a parent hat standpoint, I would have more of a level of comfort understanding what cases were in the school district and in our neighboring school districts. This is more just a general comment. I know that we don't really have control over how everybody reports and things like that. It's frustrating when you see Montgomery County numbers, but you don't necessarily understand how that translates to our immediate, vicinity and our surrounding area. So it's more of a general comment. I would feel more comfortable understanding where our personal numbers were on an ongoing basis, as opposed to Montgomery County is at less than 5%.
That information is available on the county's website. If you're interested, Ms. White, you can break it down by municipality. So it is available.
Yeah, if I can interject, the case counts are available according to municipality. The positive, percentage of positive testing is not for each individual and for each municipality, but the overall numbers of positive tests are. It's a little challenging because different places on the website break down the numbers a little bit differently, like you and I were talking about a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Russell. There's also other independent websites that put these presentations together and purport to show by school district, but they're not necessarily cutting the numbers in the most appropriate way. I've been doing some tracking for what I see for the PV communities over time, and I've shared that a couple of times individually with people, and I can continue to share that. I'm not 100% confident myself that I'm cutting the numbers correctly, but I think it's as good as I can get with the numbers that we have and the way that the data are shown on that website.
I think that the really problematic issue with not having district specific information is that one of our metrics is 5 to 10% or less. Now, have we specified that that's for the county, or have we specified that that's for the district? Or have we I mean, what, how does not having an accurate number for the district impact that particular metric?
That metric was established based on county data.
So
Okay, are we going to, okay, all right.
can I so Dr. Russell, I'm wondering if it's even possible to get that breakdown by the district level. So I imagine, the district would be notified if we have a positive case. But if somebody goes and is tested and tests negative, you would not be notified of that, would you? Or I think the county knows how many tests are being administered because I imagine the testing companies are reporting to the county. But we don't have any way of knowing whether or not someone's taken the test, do we?
Mr. Moran, if we are aware of an individual, an employee participating in a test, they are obligated to report that result to us. Is that correct? Positive or negative?
I can answer that, Dr. Russell. It's Meg.
Thank you, Mrs. Lewis. He may be
welcome.
muted.
And I can explain to you a little bit of the procedure if that would help. The nurses in the county were just actually on a call with Michelle Masters today, just speaking to some of the concerns that you have, one of them being that consistent procedure on how districts are reporting. And so they have come out with a template for us that, their main priority is to get immediate close contact and to do that contact tracing. So we now have a template of when we find out there's a positive case in the district, be it staff or student, we will do our best to do some of the contact tracing to assist them with that. We forward that to them and then they make the phone calls. What we have established today is the nurses in the district will also follow up with those identified close contacts just to make sure that they have received a letter from their contact tracer with the date that they can return to school, whether they're isolated because they're a positive case or whether they're quarantined because they were a close contact. So then the dates that we as a district may have come up with coincide and are in alignment with what the county has said. So those letters will be provided and will be expected from that. We have the nurses in the district have come up with letters for both staff and for students. If someone comes into the nurse's office with symptoms, the group A symptoms, the group B symptoms, will provide the staff member or the parent of a student with this form letter, and it will specifically line up and state what needs to be done. And that is either to see their medical provider, their primary care practice provider, to get a differential diagnosis or to go for testing. If we get that note, and that'll go to Mr. Moran as well, then that they have a differential diagnosis and they can come back with being fever-free for 24 hours or without fever-reducing medication and improve symptoms, or they go for testing. If they go for testing, they are not allowed back until they have that result. We are recommending also to staff and to parents that they seek their testing at one of the 6 county sites. And we have also outlined where they are with their contact information and their hours for them, because that turnaround time for the county is about 12 hours. They also will get notification from the testing sites, and they will also be asked to present that to Mr. Moran as well, and to the nurses. So we do have that checks and balances of who is tested, who is negative, who is positive, and following up with the Office of Public Health. Did that help?
Thank you.
So if I can follow on to that, Mrs. Lewis, are you able to
Sure.
generate a metric for tests for individuals in our district? And I guess the other piece of that, is you'd be looking at the entire, you'd only know if it was somebody in the school community, but you wouldn't necessarily know of, somebody who lives in the district, but is not connected to the schools. Is that correct?
Exactly. We only have
Okay.
information to those staff and students that are in our community.
So we're not
Exactly.
actually able then to generate a metric for our district?
No, we are not. No, but
Okay.
as on the meeting we had with Michelle today, every school district, either the department chair or the coordinator, whatever they're called in their district, spoke about how they are doing, and everyone is very pleased with how the county is doing and how the schools are doing when they're bringing in the children back into school. And I actually think some of the timelines in some of the school districts are also being moved forward if they've had a later start date. So I think that, PV is definitely a model for how we've handled things. And, I got a lot of questions too about what we've done. And so, a lot of guidance from the Office of Public Health and Michelle moving forward. So I think we have a pretty good plan. Every day we learn something new and we take that to the next day. And, we're building a very good system of keeping track of students and staff.
Okay, thank you. I see Ms. McGovern has her hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, are we getting our numbers for positive cases within the district from the Office of Public Health, or are we expecting students and parents to notify the school district about that?
Maggie, can you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
Sure, yeah, no, I hope I'm not being confusing. I just was confused myself as to whether or not PV is notified of any positive cases within the district through the Office of Public Health, or parents and students reaching out and saying, I've tested positive or I've tested negative.
It would be both. We work in cooperation with them. So we inform them, they inform us.
Okay, and then I guess just as an administrative question, where is the information being communicated to the parents and students about notifying people of testing? Because I just personally wasn't aware that people were supposed to notify if they had a negative test too. So I was just curious where that information might be coming from.
So we would know that if they came into the nurse's office and we sent them home, we would require them to be quarantined until that test comes back. So that's communication between, the individual families and the school nurse. So you probably just haven't been in that situation yet to have those conversations.
Okay, so sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
So it's only if you're showing symptoms to the point where you've been through the nurse's office in the process of getting tested through there.
Yes, and not even the nurse's office. We're also looking at attendance on a daily basis as well and seeing, what students may be out with some of those symptoms and, doing our best to follow up with those parents. And parents have been, very proud of our community, and the parents, they're having honest conversations and they are getting tested and they are getting the doctor's notes, when we have conversations with them. So, there's definitely, it's been here long enough. There's definitely an understanding and of what to do. So we haven't had, too many issues, to tell you the truth, with people not grasping what needs to be done and who needs to know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we still have the motion amended on the floor that was amended with the language that Mr. Stubers provided regarding the swimming. Are there any further questions going back to our motion on the health and safety plan?
So I have a question. I just want to clarify, if I may, to Mrs. Evans-Brockett's point. I think if I heard you correctly, Mrs. Evans-Brockett, you would like to see something articulated here about how the district will communicate to the community when it learns of a positive case. Is that correct? In addition to the swimming, pausing, and some of the language that was reviewed. Would that be correct?
I would like that. I'm not sure if the rest of the board supports that, but I would like that transparency in the report.
Okay.
And so that would go back to Dr. Kohler and Mr. Doerr. Is that additional revision acceptable to you to the motion on the floor?
I'm okay with amending the motion to include that.
I am as well.
Okay.
So
Okay.
can I just say that we will amend the original motion to include information, put swimming during physical education on pause, and to add information about communicating COVID cases to the PV community?
That's fine. I think we can use my language and then add the additional proviso that there will be notification to the community regarding positive cases.
Okay, so then Mr. Dorr, I believe you would need to second that.
I did. I second.
Okay. Then if there are no further questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, that brings us to, where are we? Well, item 4.07 is on consent. 4.08 is a motion to approve the revised PV Athletics Health and Safety Plan as presented. And I so move.
Second, Wade.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, item 4.09 is the enrollment report for October. Dr. Russell, did you have anything you wanted to share regarding these numbers?
I think I'll turn it over to Mrs. Smith. We are observing some adjustments in our numbers and charter school participants increasing. Mrs. Smith, is there anything you would like to review? This is the elementary. I can also open up the secondary.
I think just that we continue to see changes. You know, the principals continue to work with families if something needs to be changed or a child is not successful in Per Gilman in the virtual school in PVV or vice versa. They, you know, are finding that they are not successful in our programming and choose to do that. So we're trying to be, you know, as flexible as we can. So you'll see the numbers still fluctuate a little bit.
How do our charter school numbers compare to previous years?
Well, we can certainly look back to October, but 109 is a little bit higher than where we were.
Okay. Are you on mute?
I was going to say in the PSBA letter, notification today, there was an article indicating that cyber charter enrollments are up 14,000 during the COVID outbreak.
We had been observing a nice decline in charter school participation on the part of our students, and this year are seeing the opposite. Any questions about enrollment?
Okay, if there are no further questions, then that concludes my section.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kohler. That brings us to section 5 on business, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Dorr.
Thank you, Mrs. Lawton. Comments on business will be accepted. I don't see any hands up. All right, so 5.02 was done last week. 5.03 is a report on grants and donations. You can open that up, Dr. Russell. I think we had one. We had one for the Gizmo Online Science, $12,000. Source was from Explore Learning. It was a science success grant. Okay, moving on. 5.04, 5.05, 5.06, 7, 8 are all in consent. 5.09, motion to approve proposal with applied video technology for board conferencing sound system upgrades as listed at a cost not to exceed $20,000. And I so move.
I have a quick question about this.
Okay, so let's wait till we get a second and then we can open up for questions.
Second, Jean.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and I'll open for questions, and Mrs. White.
So, as it was understood from finance, these particular upgrades would be taken care of with grant money. Is that correct?
Mr. Weaver, can you verify that?
That is correct. We're going to try to put them through with a COVID grant. That is correct.
So I guess my big question with regards to this is priority, especially with allocation of grant money. The way that we've been conducting board meetings has worked so far this year, in my opinion, with the exception of a glitch here or there. And I just have some concern with utilizing grant money when I don't have a full sense of whether or not the classrooms and the ancillary areas have what they need by way of technology yet.
Well, I will respond. The classrooms don't have everything that they need in terms of technology yet. However, that's because they're on back order more so than we haven't ordered those items. I think we talked about that a little bit last week. That certainly is a challenge. I don't know if there are additional items above and beyond that would generate a greater return on investment versus this technology equipment. And maybe Mrs. Smith can speak to that. If there are items that are out there that teachers believe would really support and help engage our students in this particular environment, we can certainly consider that. Absolutely.
Well, and I guess that sort of is my point, is the conversations that we've had about the competition gym sound system, and I know some of the cafetoriums and things like that, to me, hold a higher priority than conferencing for non-scholastic purposes.
I think, yeah, I completely agree with you, Ms. White, and we're looking at the competition gym, the cafetoriums. I know that there have been some individuals conducting walkthroughs to give us some estimates. I think the challenge, if I recall correctly, was we were having trouble engaging the public in these meeting settings. And this equipment was intended to more effectively support the public being able to engage verbally with us or vocally, because that was a real challenge without giving everyone a headset and their own laptop. So that takes us to a different question.
Yeah, that's understood. And I know that was definitely a hardship when we had, 500, 600, 700 people tuning in tonight. I think we have 33 attendees, and some of which I think are probably staff and whatnot. So I guess again, in terms of priority and also allocation of grant funds, that's where I kind of call into question. Not that we shouldn't upgrade our systems, for the future and be more, technologically sound, going forward, but maybe in terms of priority, grant funds be used to move forward scholastic things, priorities for the school district in general, and then maybe this type of upgrade, especially for something like $20,000, be put more on the back burner in terms of like a capital, expense for the future. That's just sort of my 2 cents.
I see.
So I see Mrs. Evans Brockett has her hand up, but I'd actually like to follow on to what Mrs. White said. And so, Mr. Weaver, are we getting just a block grant where we have a certain amount of money and we choose how we want to allocate it? Or is it that each thing that we apply for can be sent through the grant program?
Each thing that we apply for has been matched to each individual grant at this particular point in time moving forward. And as we provided in the finance update, I think we're at $1.1 million worth of grant opportunities at this point in time. And we have about $900,000 spent or encumbered. So we do have space at this particular point in time to cover these expenditures.
Okay.
But there are additional sound requirements in other avenues, is my point. So if the money needs to be allocated towards a sound, is that what you're saying, Mr. Weaver, that money needs to be allocated towards sound upgrades, towards technology upgrades, and so that's why this has been appropriated that way?
For this particular piece, yes, that's correct.
So again, if in terms of priority, because this is not supporting a scholastic need, I would suggest that scholastic sound needs be met first.
Mr. Weaver, have you been updated by Mr. Ganesh in regards to what he expects us to need going forward as far as providing technology in the classrooms and for students and such? I mean, do we have an idea of how much of an expenditure we're going to need to make going forward? I know that there are a lot of things that he's ordered or that we've ordered that haven't been delivered yet, but has he pointed out to you any particular holes that he would like to see filled in the budget as in regards to what we're going to need in the way of technology for the classrooms?
Mrs. Roberts, good question, but no, not really. Every cabinet meeting, we have an update from both Mrs. Smith and Mr. Ganesh in regards to the items that they've ordered. Usually the back ordered conversation comes up. And I think once we get the webcams for the teachers that we had talked about, which are also back ordered, I think that would be pretty much everything that we're aware of at this point in time.
Okay, so I have a couple more questions. I see Mrs. Evans-Brockett has had her hand up for a little bit, so go ahead, Mrs. Evans-Brockett.
Thank you. I just wanted to, Mr. Weaver kind of said it with the amount of money that we have encumbered versus what we have available. And I have to say, last week when I saw that number and saw it was less than $200,000 that we have available, and we're only a month into school, that concerns me. And, so to piggyback on Ms. White's comment of using this for non-scholastic purposes, I understand that we have technology that hasn't come in yet, but I do know that some of our staff are very frustrated with the live streaming experience, and hopefully whatever we've ordered will provide for that, but we don't know that yet. So I prefer that we budget for this in the future rather than using grant money that could be used to make sure that our students have the academic experience that they need to have.
Okay, Mrs. Smith?
I just wanted to chime in with the questions regarding the resources and funds available for scholastic or academic items. Mr. Ganesh and I have worked pretty closely to ensure that we've ordered all of those devices, and some of them, the document cameras and the second monitors, actually most recently came in, and we're working on those distribution plans. That's different than the webcams. We're still waiting on that, although that won't be the the be-all end-all solution for our teachers in a hybrid, but it certainly will be a tool that may help them and support them in doing that. We've also used a lot of Ready to Learn funds this year for additional, what I'll call digital resources for curriculum, where in the past maybe we had hard copies of textbooks. And now that we either don't have enough to hand out to every student because we shared them in the past, we've purchased some digital licenses. So we've seen a large amount of those monies go towards additional subscriptions for curricular resources. But there are still quite a bit of money in the Ready to Learn that I'm kind of hanging on to your point, Mrs. Evans-Brockett, as things maybe come up throughout the year or that teachers didn't anticipate. So we can't afford some of those items.
So I'll ask my question, or did you have a follow-up on that, Mrs. Evans-Brockett? Okay, I'll ask my question, and then I see Mrs. White has her hand up again. So Mr. Weaver, I know we've talked about the sound needs for the auditoriums and cafetoriums. When might we see those estimates?
I would defer to Mr. Ganesh, who's been in contact with them, but You know, they came in last week and they went through all the buildings. I know because we met with them, Mr. Ganesh, myself, Mr. Clemmer, Mr. Glansky specifically at the high school, but I don't know.
So, Mrs. Lofton, I expect those. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. So I expect those estimates to be in a week or so. So they came in, the audiovisual engineers came in last week. They did a walkthrough of our high school and all the elementary buildings. And I do expect a detailed quote from them by sometime next week.
Okay. So do you have a ballpark sense of where the numbers are going to come in?
In briefly talking to them, again, very, very briefly in a rough draft of what the plan would be for the high school gym, about replacing about 8 of those speakers, putting in a new sound system at a soundboard. They were talking about in the neighborhood of about $30,000 for the high school gym. Again, that's a very, very rough numbers without them pulling in specifics. So that is for the high school gym, and I expect the other buildings to be much less, primarily because we plan to reuse some of the speakers from the high school gym into some of the elementary buildings. And the middle school east and west, they have their audio systems. They have the new audio systems installed, so there's no work to be done in east and west. So we're talking about the 4 elementary buildings and the high school gym. So these 5 locations, again, I would think high school would be the most expensive one with around $30,000. Again, those are very preliminary numbers from what we heard yesterday, what we heard last week.
So let's just say we would ballpark that at like $40,000 total for, and I realize you're just kind of shooting in the dark a little bit, but just ballpark somewhere in that neighborhood, 45,000.
For the high school, yeah, I would say like around $30,000 for the high school and probably close to 15 or 20 for the other
Okay.
buildings. So you're talking about 4 buildings, $60,000 plus. You're talking about $100,000 in all between the 5 buildings at least.
So Mr. Weaver, do you know off the top of your head how much technology grant what is the value of technology grant opportunities that is still open?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I would have to get you that number.
Okay, because I'm wondering if we would be able to put both of these sets of needs through the same grant.
Yeah, I don't know about that. We'll have to look into that and see if that's a possibility. Again, the connection for the board sound conference system was to connect to the community, as we already talked about, and that's
right.
Might be looked at a little differently than a sound system in a gymnasium. Just saying that.
So the other question I have then about the grant is there a certain set of money that they have, and once the monies are spent, you're out of luck? Because does it behoove us to apply for the grant sooner rather than later? Because I'm wondering if maybe we should table this, find out a little bit more, come back to it next month when we see what our other needs are, and then see if it makes sense to do it next month. But my hesitation in that is, if we wait another month, will the money be gone because other people have applied for it already?
It's not a competitive type of grant. These allocations are our allocations to spend as we can within the guidelines of the grant.
Oh, okay. Oh, so this money's been allocated to us. We don't have to apply for it.
We still have to follow through an application, but it's not that they will reject the application for the total dollars. They may come back and say that's not allowable under our standards for a particular grant, but that total grant dollar figure will not be adjusted.
Okay. And then if we don't find a way to use the money, then we'll lose it?
We will find a way to utilize the money.
Okay. But so when do we have to find it? Like, is there a timeline?
The different grants have different due dates. Some of them go into 2022. Some of them have to be expended by December 31st.
So this could wait a month.
We have time. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, I'll suggest that we consider tabling it, but I see Mrs. White has her hand up. So I will turn it over to Mrs. White.
So I just had a real quick follow-up to Mrs. Smith as to whether or not, understanding that we're still receiving the materials that have been ordered and you're working on distribution of what's been received and all of that, is there an avenue open for staff, especially secondary, and then also the virtual, the designated virtual teachers at the elementary, on the elementary side? Is there an avenue for them to put in technology requests above and beyond what's already been provided?
So I would say yes, Mrs. White. Typically at the secondary level, those requests go through either their department chair and then are directed to their building principals or to myself. So for example, social studies at the high school was requesting an online resource, and they went to their department chair, who then emailed myself and Dr. Moss, and then we together investigated, looked at the costs, and determined the funding source for that. So typically at the secondary level, that would be the process. Or sometimes through their tech coordinators. Each building has a tech coordinator that they may be hearing a lot, oh, we need this or we need that, and then it kind of comes to Mr. Ganesh or I through that avenue. And elementaries, a lot of the times go directly through their principal because they don't have department chairs.
Okay, and I guess because of the fact that we're in such a new dynamic with, especially at the elementary level with designated virtual teachers, obviously their need for, I would imagine, their need for certain technology would be higher than the teachers that are obviously in the building. I'm just assuming, but above and beyond that, so if that's the normal chain of command, has it been communicated though to the staff in general that there are these COVID grant funds available to us as a district? And then how are the requests being prioritized? And a lot of times I think that there's a feeling to not ask because you don't want to seem like you don't have what you need. And so I guess my curiosity is really whether or not we're really being as giving as we could be to aides.
I would respond that I think our teachers are certainly conservative. However, I think during this time they have been willing to express a need. Maybe it depends on who they express that to, but it does trickle to Mr. Ganesh, myself, Dr. Russell, or the supervisors, so that we can then determine. And really, Mrs. White, we use a very similar process to that we do during regular budgeting. We really investigate. We look for, is there an alternative to solve this particular issue that they have? Where might the appropriate funds come from? Is this a once and done purchase, or is it going to be an ongoing piece that we need? So very similar to regular budgeting process, but I do think they are asking. In particular, I know the elementary teachers, like the virtual ones that you just spoke of, they had a meeting, all of the fully virtual teachers, with Mr. DeAndrea recently, and he shared his notes with me, which we'll talk about at our level meeting tomorrow, and investigate, are there any additional resources that maybe they need? I can give you an example. We did purchase a subscription to Raz Kids, and every K-2 teacher, as well as every fully virtual teacher in the elementary, received that, because you're right, they have a little bit of a different need for some of those resources that they have. But I do think they are asking, and we're learning a lot of resources that are available to us that maybe we just didn't tap into before.
Okay, I appreciate that. Like I said, it's such an unusual time, and I want the staff just at large to have a feeling that they, even if the answer is no, or that we can't do X, Y, or Z, that at least the conversation happens. And I feel like historically, a lot of times, the conversation ended before it even started, and I just don't feel like that's the culturally that's where we're really heading. And I just feel like they should feel free and know that they, everybody has a voice, and everybody can have a feeling that they can ask for what they need to do their job, to the best of their ability. So it's really more of a devil's advocate rhetorical thing with regards to just being able to speak up and being empowered to do so. And then above and beyond that, from Mr. Ganesh, from your desk, do you feel like there are things that before we go and spend $20,000 on mics for board meetings, we could really be using this money for? And you don't have to answer that. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I know we could all find really great ways to use $20,000 in our lives. But those are the types of conversations that I'd be interested in having before we designate this money for this reason.
So Mrs. White, so we do have in technology, we do have a new equipment budget that we budget every year, looking for the new technologies to put in our classrooms. That monies are still available if we decide to do something of that sort. But as of this point, I think again, I'm gonna wait till answer that question. And I probably want to take some time to answer that question, but as of this point, I think we're in a decent shape. Once the equipment that we already ordered comes in, the document cameras, as Mrs. Smith mentioned, the webcams, the Chromebooks, when all those things comes in, I think our staff would be in a very good shape. We already have the monitors for them, so they have the second monitor. So you're trying to provide as much technology resource as we could possibly, the hardware wise and software wise. Even if there's an additional need, there is an additional section in the technology budget to satisfy that need.
So Mr. Subers, can I just make a friendly amendment to table this?
It wouldn't be an amendment, it'd just be a motion to table.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion to table.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to table. Are there any questions?
Motions to table, you don't discuss.
Oh,
sorry.
I will never remember that. All right. Sorry. Okay, so all those in favor of tabling?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Okay, 5.10 is a new item. The motion to approve to waive the parking fees for the high school students for the 2020-21 school year, and I so move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
5.11 is also a new item. It is a motion to approval to waive the activity fees for the middle school students for the 2020-2021 school year, and I so move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions?
I mean, not a question, but I know last week, Judy, we had talked about revisiting this, just the entire process. Is that a conversation that's going to take place moving forward after this year?
So we did actually dig into this a little bit further during Finance Committee on Thursday, and I think that was the general consensus, was that this is something that we're going to do for now, but it needs to be, excuse me, a larger conversation as we look at our budget for next year.
Okay,
because I think there's a lot to discuss around how our activity fees are structured. Okay, if there's no further questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, 5.12 is a new item. Motion to approve gathering size limits in public school district facilities per the Health and Safety Plan checklist for Montgomery County Office of Public Health, and I so move.
Second, Wade.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
5.13, the new item to approve a service level agreement with Bobby Brown, Collegeville, PA, to provide technology support at a rate of $50 per hour as needed. The monies are already budgeted in the technology budget, and I so move.
Second, Gene.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And that ends my section. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorr. Dr. Weston, Section 6, payment of bills.
Thank you, Mrs. Lofton. Item 6.01, comments on the payment of bills. Comments from the audience are accepted on payment of bills. I am seeing no hands raised at this time. So we'll move on to item 6.02. the ratification and bills, and payroll and authorization of payments. The recommended action is a motion to ratify the payment of bills and payroll as per the list submitted for the period ending September 30th, 2020, and to authorize the payment of bills on the check and voucher registered submitted for October, and I so move.
Second, Gene.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions?
I will be abstaining from voting on this because I received reimbursements for Power Packs.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans-Brockett. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item 6.03, the approval of the treasurer's report and financial statements. The recommended action is a motion to approve the treasurer's report and financial statements, including summary of cash and investment accounts, as prepared by the administration for the period ending September 30th, 2020, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And that concludes section 6.
Thank you, Dr. Weston. Mrs. Evans-Brockett, section 7, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Lofton. Item 7.101, are there any comments from the audience? Seeing no hands raised. 7.02 was acted on last week, as was 7.03. 704 was removed from the agenda. Item 705, the recommended action is to ratify the creation of a temporary professional employee position to accommodate increased enrollment in Virtual Voyage 2.0 kindergarten program due to implementation of the district's revised phase school reopening health and safety plan, including parent option for fully remote instruction, and I so move.
Second, Wade.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
706, the recommended action is to ratify the temporary professional employee as listed to accommodate increased enrollment in VV 2.0 kindergarten program, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
707, 8, 9, 10, and 11 were all acted on last week. 7, 12, 13, and 14 are all on consent. 715, the recommended action is to ratify or approve the leaves of absence as listed, and I so move.
Second, Wade.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And 716 is a new item. The recommended action is to approve the creation of a full-time teaching position, professional staff as instructional coach to offer coaching services grades K through 12, and I so move.
Second, Wade.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And that concludes section.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans-Brockett. Mrs. Roberts, section 8 on support personnel, please.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lofton. Any comments on support personnel? I personally am not seeing any. 8.02, the action was taken on 10.5, action taken 10.5 for 803. 8.04, the action was taken 10.5. 8.05, the action was taken on 10.5. 8.06 is on consent. 8.07 is on consent. 8.08 is on consent. 8.09 is a new item, the acceptance of retirements and resignations. The motion is to accept the retirements and resignations as listed, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
8.10, revised on 10/12, is a new item, approval of support appointments. The motion is to ratify/approve the provisional employment of the following support personnel pending fulfillment of all statutory requirements, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
8.11 is a new item, approval to create a payroll specialist position. And the request is to approve the creation of a payroll specialist position to be a member of the supervisors, confidential secretaries, and registered nurses group. And I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
8.12 is a new item, approval of payroll specialist. The motion is to approve the provisional employment of the following support personnel pending fulfillment of all statutory requirements, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And that completes section 8. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Roberts. Moving on to section 9, I'll turn it over to Dr. Hallis.
Thank you. Item 9.01, comments on governance from the audience are accepted at this time. I see no hands up. So item 9.02 is a first reading on policies. The following policies are presented for a first reading. And we read these off last week, right? I don't know if I have to do it again. Are there any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. Item 9.03 and 9.04 were on consent, and that ends my report.
Thank you, Dr. Hallis. We are now at our closing items, and item 10.01, comments from the audience are accepted on any topic. I'll give our attendees a moment if anyone wishes to use the raise their hand feature and make a public comment. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up, so we'll move to 10.02, comments from board members. And I see Mrs. Maris has her hand up.
Thank you, Mrs. Lofton. I just want to encourage us as a board, administration, and a district to continue to really think long and hard about the social health, the emotional health, and the academic health of the students in our district. And I know that we have the physical health, and I know we all have that in our minds, but I am looking at the metrics, hearing what's going on in other districts, and just with the metrics that we have, we are in a really good place. And I have grave concerns that as the winter goes on, that we're not going to have the same metrics in place, and that this is the time to, as to the best of our ability, to more quickly get students into the brick and mortar classrooms, which is probably why our numbers are going up with cyber charters, attendance, all of that. So it's just something that's been really, that I would like us all to continue to keep in the forefront. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other comments from the board, I'll move to adjourn the meeting. Before I adjourn, I would like to announce that we had an executive session prior to the meeting for the purposes of discussing personnel, and we will be having an executive session after the meeting for discussing real estate. Thank you, everyone, and have a fantastic evening. Meeting is adjourned.